Hello everyone. Welcome to my
Hello.
pink room that you'll see is actually my bedroom. Can you see? so, so yeah, interesting times. Got a lot to talk about. Um, Three things really. The first one obviously is macOS Big Sur, macOS 11, the big number change. And then secondly will be iOS 14. And then shortly after that, we'll talk about Apple Silicon. So I'm going to jump straight into my presentation. Okay. So, Mike, you'll have to tell me if this is coming through okay when I launch it.
Yeah, will do.
Okay. Okay, share screen. Okay. Can you see everyone?
Yes.
You can. Okay, good. So obviously I'm going to be looking at the screen. So if you're looking at my picture, I might look a bit weird because I'm looking off to the left. So yes, so here's what we're talking about, just mentioned. Okay. And so yeah, there's a few things. It's both a huge update and a not so huge update at the same time. Its main difference for most people is going to be the general look and feel, which has been updated quite heavily for the first time in quite a few years. I'm sure you've probably all remembered every time I come, I say, look out for iOS and macOS to be kind of merging slowly but surely. And it's kind of happening now for sure. We're going to look at the new control center, notification center and widgets. There's a whole new Safari, which we'll look at. Messages has been updated, maps, and then something called Catalyst, which we've talked about before. I'll talk you through that again. So yeah, the overarching theme of the WWDC keynote was trying to polish the Mac OS because it has kind of lagged behind. And in recent years, lots of people have accused Apple of kind of letting it go a bit and not putting all the emphasis on Macs anymore. Because of course the iPhone and the iPad makes Apple most of their money. So that's where they put all of their effort and their expertise. So they have in recent times kind of let the Macs fall by the wayside. And in this presentation, they kind of hoped to give everybody the evidence that that's not the case anymore and that they are going to improve what they're doing. It's definitely a sign of a future, which we'll talk about later on with the Apple Silicon, of there just being one platform at one point in the future. We're not there yet, but everything is definitely falling into place for that. So yeah, the cleaner layouts is an important thing because they've basically borrowed most of the graphics from iOS, and they've given things, as you can see in this slide, it's a kind of transparent look, which I know some of you might think, well, that's very kind of Windows from 5 years ago. But yeah, it's kind of giving it a uniform look finally. So Mac OS and iOS kind of converge a little. So you'll see in the menu drop-down window itself on this slide, you can see that things are just a bit better spaced and things have been given more room to kind of make it easier for you to see. Some people have argued that they've been given more room for a future touch device that might be on the cards. And you'll notice a lot across Big Sur, if any of you have downloaded the beta, that lots and lots of things have been made larger, and lots and lots of things have been made what I call peckable, like a bird pecking. And I'm assuming that's because at some point there probably will be a Mac with touchscreen, despite Apple for many years saying that that would be ridiculous. So yeah. So yeah, they've also changed all of the icons, and they've done this to kind of unify again with iOS. iOS has all the square icons, and in recent years, for some reason, on the Mac they were making all of the icons circle, when a lot of them were square before. So they've gone back to squares, but more like an iOS square. And they've made some interesting choices. Not all of the not all of the icons are very attractive in many people's opinions. Like for example, if you look at the App Store icon at the top there, the blue one, the new one has been given like a slightly relief look with shadows, and a lot of people are saying that's kind of a bit childish, a bit kind of Fisher Price. But we'll see. But yes, there's one which has been getting a lot of attention, and that is this one, the battery icon. It's horrendous. It's yeah, it's trying to do too many things at once. It's both flat and round and 3D at the same time. It's I don't know who did that. I don't know which intern did that. I haven't worked at Apple for 7 years now, but that would never have happened when I worked there. Yeah, someone was just going wild with Photoshop with that one. I'm sure that's going to be replaced when it's finally released, because it's an abomination, really. So yeah, there are some interesting design choices. So yeah, so menus and all of the kind of places that you see, and I'll show you a couple of examples. Everything's kind of just been tidied up a little. So if I go into the Finder, you'll see that we have this kind of transparency on the left here. Oh no, you're not seeing it, sorry. Me assuming that you can see and you can't. Okay, 1 second. Just need to share the whole screen. Okay, can you see now? Can you see my desktop? Okay, great. So yeah, you can see, let me minimize the keynote. You can see that there's transparency built in. So when I move the window, you can see the blue areas behind and the red. And they've created this newer kind of sidebar on the left here and taken a lot of the icons and things from iOS, in actual fact. And what you'll see is the new symbols at the top here as well. They've tried to kind of, yeah, you can see what I mean. It's more like a button now than a separate symbol that it used to be. And everything's gone down the way of iconographics rather than labels and things. So some people might struggle because it doesn't exactly tell you what these things at the top are. You just have to kind of know. But everything's been given more space. There's more space around things. There's more kind of white space for you to counter. And then if we go up to the menus, you'll see, yeah, there's a lot more. There's lots of kind of icons in the menus as well, which is a very iOS thing to do. In the menu bar itself at the top here, you see it's transparent now, and it actually shows through the desktop picture slightly, not a huge amount, but enough. And so yeah, one of the other new features is Control Center, which most of you are familiar with from your iPhones and iPads. And so that's just up here on the right here. So it's kind of almost exactly borrowed from iOS again. And again, a bit like how I said with some of the stuff earlier, a lot of these things look like they've been designed for a finger rather than a mouse. They don't really feel as comfortable with a mouse as they would with a finger, so much so that I'm here with my laptop and my monitor. And a couple of times today, I've gone to actually swipe that with my finger and realize, what am I doing? I'm 5 years ahead. So in the Control Center, you have obviously your Wi-Fi and a few other things that you can access quickly, settings, keyboard brightness, that kind of thing. And then also you've got a couple of things like the music that's currently playing and then AirPlay display. And if we go into settings on the Mac, there's a new section called, where is it? Dock and menu bar. So in the dock and menu bar of system preferences now, you have these sections on the left, which dictate what you want to be inside your control center. So you can turn stuff on and off. And for example, because I'm using Control Center, I don't need to have all these other things up here, so I can turn them off from being in the menu bar. So I don't need Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in my menu bar anymore, and neither do I need AirPlay or most of the other things really. So now when I go up to Control Center, they're just all in here instead of along the top as well. So yeah, Control Center's been pretty much borrowed from iOS. I've just realized something. Hang on a second. No chat. Yes, I can see chat. I just wanted to make sure that there were no messages I've missed.
Little message from Simon just saying that in the latest beta, I think, Simon, are you talking about the battery icon has been replaced? Somebody at Apple obviously thought it stank too.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing the chat. Where is the chat? Hang on.
It just looks like the sort of the battery icon when you know when you plug your device in and you get the green shaded cylinder with a top and bottom cap. It looks like that now. Right.
Okay, good. Because I don't know what that was. I don't know who signed off on that. I think maybe they didn't, and it slipped in there, but it got lots of attention. Okay, just go back to just one thing, Mike. How do I bring up the chat window? Because I can't seem to bring it up whilst I'm presenting.
I would have expected it to pop up if you just clicked on the chat icon at the bottom of the screen.
It's not there at the moment because I'm sharing my screen.
Ah, in which case,
so maybe it doesn't let me do it at the same time.
In which case, I'll alert you.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's have a look. Oh no, I found it hidden, got it, there it is. It's hiding in the corner. Okay, so back to here. So, move that out of the way. Oh goodness, the chat window won't go away now. Anyway, you're not going to miss much from behind there. So yeah, so the notification center has also been changed. Now the easy way to get to your notification center, a lot of people used to struggle with this. You used to have to swipe in from off the right hand side of your trackpad, which a lot of people found difficult to do, or you would have an icon to click on. Now you just need to click on the clock at the top there, and it should swipe in. Oops. It should, oh, come on. Mine's not playing ball. Okay, let me try again. There you go. So now it's you just click on the time, and that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? A notification will be tied to the clock or the time. So at the top here, you've got all of your app notifications, and then at the bottom here, you've got some of the new widgets, which you'll also see. We'll talk about more in when we talk about iOS. So yeah, they've just cleaned this up and made it easier to access, really. So yeah, the big one is probably the most important update for a lot of people is Safari has been massively updated and is hugely improved. It started to lag behind Chrome and even Firefox for a while, and was a bit slow and not compatible even with some websites and some technologies. So yeah, they've kind of done a lot of work to change it. So we'll have a look at that. I'll take you through the slides first, and then I'll show you actually in Safari itself. So one of the things that they've built into Safari, which is already present in other browsers like Brave or Firefox, is the ability to see a privacy report on a website that you're visiting. And what that means is when you visit a website, you can click on the little shield icon at the top of Safari, and it will tell you exactly who is tracking you and what data they're following from your browsing habits. Until now, it's always been quite a vague thing. Nobody really knows. We all have that annoying pop-up when you go to a website saying, are you sure you'd like to accept our terms, blah, blah, blah. And then buried within those are usually a list of all the things that they're going to do with your data. But this is a much more explicit way of knowing what a website is doing when you're visiting a website. Another cool feature that they've baked into it is the ability for Safari to tell you if your password has ever been hacked by anyone. So what happens is when companies lose data, which is happening more and more often, there are central registries which take note of all of the passwords that have ended up being leaked. And if any of your passwords match any of those passwords that are in that huge database, Safari will tell you and advise you to change the password immediately. So it's pretty cool that it does that, and it will yeah, keep us all safe, hopefully. Oh, 1 second. My Mac has just decided to turn off. Okay, we're back again. Okay, sorry about that. Let me try sharing again. Sharing screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Can you see it? Okay, great.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So extensions. So extensions were a big problem with Safari. So Safari was one of the earlier browsers to have extensions, which means you could add extra features. And they took off in quite a big way. And then all of a sudden, Apple decided to ban them and make it so you could only download them through the App Store, which meant that because of the huge restrictions that Apple places on developers when they use the App Store, many of the extensions that people use disappeared. And they became very complicated for developers to make because they had to fit in with the Apple App Store ecosystem. So, and then the other side effect is that once they moved the extensions to being in the App Store, they didn't really give people an easy way to find them. So you just had to know that they existed and then look for it. There wasn't an actual single place where you could go and see all the extensions with ease. There was like a somewhat kind of minimal page with a few of them on, but it didn't show all of the extensions. And you had to really know where to find it. So now there's a dedicated section in the App Store, and it will show all of these extensions. What's also really cool is they've decided to kind of go backwards a bit in a good way, and they've made it so developers now can actually just copy across their Chrome extensions. So if you use Chrome, all the extensions that you use on Chrome will actually work with this once the developers tweak them a little bit. So it should mean that Safari should have every single extension that you could possibly want in the future. And they've also included translation. So they've included translation as a beta at the moment. So they're not putting all of their kind of emphasis on it being perfect yet. But it basically means that whenever you browse a website that's not in English, you'll get a symbol that appears in the address bar, and you can click on it to translate to a certain subset of languages. And it works very similar to Google Translate, and it uses Siri and machine learning to translate the websites, which is pretty cool. Okay. So it's faster. It's a lot faster. And I actually switched to using Firefox and Opera before it was updated, because I found that Safari was getting very slow for me. And when you spend a lot of your day on the web, a few seconds here or there does make a difference. So now they've actually they've made the bold statement that they think Safari is now the fastest web browser in the world. They also claim that it's the most energy efficient, which is super important for anybody that uses obviously mobile devices and devices that use batteries. So now that they're saying you can browse for 40% longer, and things should be on average 50% faster than Chrome. And Chrome was already a little bit faster than Safari, so it should be noticeably different. And even on the beta, which is full of bugs and things, it's still actually yeah, very fast. It's much faster. And I think I'm probably going to switch back to Safari after this. So messages. So messages has been given some attention. Messages always felt like an afterthought on the Mac. They kind of semi-merged it with iOS, and they kind of gave you some of the features of the iOS version of messages, but now they've pretty much given you everything. And they've done that because they are using the Catalyst system, which they used to port over some of the iPad apps in macOS Catalina last year and the year before. I think they did it with the News app and the Stocks app. So they've also done it with messages, and so they're making it more aligned. So it should be like the same experience on all devices. So that means that you have things like message effects, and you can have group messages and all that kind of thing. One of the other things you've got is pinned conversations, which I know it sounds like a ridiculously silly and trivial feature, but already it's made a big difference. When you've got hundreds of people in your messages list, it's good to put the people that matter to you the most right up at the top, so it's easy to find their message rather than having to scroll through endless messages to find their message. So now you can pin to the top people that kind of are important or work colleagues that you talk to a lot. And you'll see from this screenshot that when they send you a message, you get a little pop-up over their picture with their message or an emoji of what they've done. And it also shows you their online status, which is, it's quite cool. And those pins will synchronize across all your devices. So whatever you pin to the top on your phone will be pinned to the top on your Mac as well. So it's all kind of talking to each other. Oh, no, ignore that slide. Maps. So Maps, I'll exit for Maps. So Maps has been given a bit of TLC, not a huge update, admittedly, for Maps. But if we go here, for me, the biggest update is Look Around has been added and Guides. So Look Around, if we go to New York, for example. So Look Around has existed on the iPhone now for a year, and now it's finally on the Mac. So if we go down into New York, for example, where should we go? Let's go and see, well, not Trump Towers, that's for sure. Let's go to Grand Central. So I just drop a pin, and then on that pin, I can click Look Around. And now I can actually move around. And a lot of you will be familiar with this from Google. Google has a very similar thing called Street View, but the Apple version is much smoother and I think has much better photography. Better than that though, if I come out, we go somewhere else. Let's walk around here. Oh, trapped in Grand Central Station. Let's go somewhere. Beacon Liquors, there we go. So when you actually go around in Street View, when you see a business, it should pop up with the business's information. So here, for example, click on here and it will give us all the information about that business and hopefully some photos. And it uses the Yelp database to find all this information. And so you can go down the street virtually and check out all of the shops and things around and see as much information as you could possibly desire. And yeah, I just think it's a cool way of finding a way around. So that's Look Around, and that's been added to Apple Maps. And then you also have guides. So let's see if we find a guide. Oops, no, let's go to here. 1 second. Back to my keynote, I'll show you an example there. Obviously, it's very US centric, so there's almost nothing, none of these updates really apply to the UK just yet, but they are supposed to be coming. So one of the things that they've added is guides, and guides are kind of curated sections of content in maps. So let me try and find an example, because you need to know where one exists before you can find it. So this is my Safari. So let's go maps, big guides. Of course, it's taking us to the place, Big Sur. And type in up. Bear with me. So scroll all the way down to maps. Guides, yeah. So basically, you will have guides like you can see in this screenshot that they've got one from Lonely Planet appearing, and they will tend to pop up when you're near something that's featured in the guide, and it'll be something you can click on, and then you'll see other relevant things in there. And you can also save things into your own guides. So if let's have a look. Let's see if I appear on here, shall we? Yes, I am home. So I can click on add to favorites. And where are you? Save to guide. And I can say new guide. And I can call this guide edit guide. Legends. And if you create a guide, so I've got guides I've made for the best fish and chip shops in London, for coffee shops that I share with friends. You can share them with people. And what's very cool about the guides is when you share them with people, they actually create a website for it. So when you share it to people, they don't necessarily need to be using Apple devices or Apple software to view your guide. So it will just appear as an Apple website with a list of all the places on. So yeah, that's guides. Look around. So yeah, Catalyst, which I talked about a second ago in regards to messages, has been used a lot more across the operating system. And basically, in a nutshell, what Catalyst is it's taking the best of iPad apps and adding a layer that allows a keyboard and mouse to work with them on the Mac, and then porting them over to the Mac. Some of you may have seen already the update to iPads, especially the iPad Pros, that now you can get a case with a mouse, trackpad, and a keyboard built in, that you have proper keyboard and mouse support, which I think has been done really well. And so what that means is you'll see more and more things pop up on the Mac store, which will be direct ports of iPad apps, and there are thousands of iPad apps. You might have noticed in recent times that the amount of Mac apps has been kind of dwindling, and it's not been a huge amount of new content, because it traditionally was a lot more difficult to design apps for a Mac. But yeah, with Catalyst, Apple has given developers the ability to easily port over their iPad apps. And like I said, quite a few of the Apple standard ones have already been ported, like the Apple News and the Stocks app, and a few others are probably going to come. I'm sure a few more will probably pop up before Big Sur is actually released in September. So compatibility, basically, MacBooks that are 2015 and later are supported. MacBook Pros that are 2013 and later. MacBook Airs 2013 and later. Mac Minis 2014 and later. iMac 2014 and later. And iMac Pro 2017 and later. Of course, that's because iMac Pros have only been out since 2017. And Mac Pros 2013 and later. So all of those Macs should run Big Sur without too much difficulty, without any problems. So let me exit out there. Do we have any questions on, let me just double check. Okay. Okay, Big Sur icon.
How stable? How stable?
What, sorry?
How stable?
Oh, very. The first beta, which I downloaded, was a nightmare, and nothing would work, even Zoom. So I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to do this at all, because of course I did it on my main computer, which was silly. But then very shortly after, a second beta was released, and that plugged most of the problems. The problems that I keep having with the beta so far is Wi-Fi connectivity. But I found the solution to any Wi-Fi problems was to use a DNS server, and I use the 1.1.1.1 service, and that makes it fine actually. But I haven't really noticed any other apps, and surprisingly, surprisingly, almost all of my apps work without any issues really. I was expecting quite a lot of things to crash when I open them. The apps that I am having trouble with at the moment are Adobe Illustrator and InDesign, just because they're, you know, how slow Adobe are updating stuff. So yeah, so far it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Good, thank you.
So I see, I'm just looking at the chat again. Safari's been incompatible with MS Teams, which I have for work, so a better Safari will be welcome. Yes, and the Safari is being opened up, so because of those extensions being made portable from Chrome, I think a lot of websites will work better with Safari. The reason Safari is often not working with websites is not because Safari doesn't have the technology, the modern technology, is because it doesn't actually have the old technology. So a lot of websites that use older technologies that existed before Safari don't work, and that's usually because the originating manufacturers haven't updated their core stuff, basically. So Safari was always quite discriminate about what things it would support, so it would only support the most modern standards for the web. But of course, there's still plenty of websites out there which are built on old standards. But that's changing. Microsoft Teams, yes. Will it be compatible with most printers? I'm pretty sure it should be. I can't think why not. I don't think there's anything significantly changed about its print processing. Most printers work without having to use the printer manufacturer software. But if you want to use the printer's software, the software for printers might need to be updated, and they tend to be the slowest of all to update. So you're probably looking about 6 months after it releases before the printer manufacturers actually release their own software. Generally, printer software is terrible anyway, and I don't use it. So I just use image capture for scanning and for that kind of thing. It's usually always much quicker and easier than using the printer's bulky, cruddy software that's usually slow and crashes. So, but yeah, I'm pretty certain my printers are fine. I've got 3 different printers and they're all different manufacturers and they're all working fine. So I don't think there'll be any problems with printers. Any other questions about macOS, Big Sur? First OS 11 after all these years? Nope. Oh, will it be? Oh, no, no more. I'll give you 1 minute to come up with a question and then we'll move on.
I feel we should be providing coffee at this point, but it would be very
awkward,
wouldn't it?
Where is it? Would it slow down on Mac Mini 2014? That's a good question. Will it slow down on Mac Mini 2014?
Ooh.
Generally, these updates are better for your Mac. There's been a few in past times that have had a few detrimental effects on speed, but generally they always improve speed. They generally make the operating system smaller, not slower. And the smaller the operating system becomes, the better. The big behind the scenes changes were last year with Catalina, which changed the way that the drive systems work and the way that the data is stored. So yes, I mean, I don't think it will make it any worse, if that's any comfort. But a Mac Mini from 2014 is probably it's not going to be greatly improved, but I don't think it will be any slower. So if they're very strict with their supported list. So if it's on the supported list, it's because they're confident that it will work well and better than at least the version before. Yeah. But yeah, it does feel like the time for coffee and biscuits, doesn't it? But we need to move on. So the next part is iOS 14, which again is big and small at the same time. There isn't a huge list of new features, but there's a couple of big ones, I guess. So we'll breeze through them. So the first thing is, let me minimize the chat for a second. This is frustrating. I can't minimize the chat whilst the keynote's open and I can't see the, oh, go away. Chat. Let's move you down there. Okay. So one of the first things that they've changed is the widgets. So widgets existed on the far left screen of your iPhone when you swiped all the way onto the left, and it would just be kind of snippets of information, quick access to notes and that kind of stuff. But they were very dry and boring, and they all looked the same. and they were stuck there. You couldn't really play with them or manipulate them. So with the new widgets on the home screen, you can see, I've just realized my text is from a previous presentation. Ignore the text on that slide, everyone. But just look at the pictures. Yeah, so now your widgets, they come in multiple sizes. So all of the widgets that are supported, you can choose which size for them to be, whether they take up the full width of the screen or a smaller square, like you can see on these. And you can actually place them on your home screens anywhere you like. So if you want to be able to always see, for example, on this middle picture, your activity, and you want a quick access to a folder of photos and quick access to your what's playing on your Apple Music, you can dot those around your home screen in wherever position you want. And when you put them onto your home screen, it just makes all of the icons move out the way, so you don't have to sit and shuffle around all of the icons to make room for them. So I've been playing with them. They're probably the most buggy part of iOS at the moment. A lot of them are crashing and not showing data and stuff like that. And they keep, with every update, they keep changing the look and feel of them. But I think to begin with, it's probably only going to be the Apple widgets which are supported, the standard ones, but developers will be working hard, I think, to make their apps work with the widgets too. So they also introduced App Library. So a lot of you probably are like me, you end up with hundreds of apps all over your phone, and you start trying to keep them into some kind of order. And then after about 300, I've got about 300 apps on my phone, which is ridiculous. But when you get to over 100, say, it becomes just impossible and you give up, you just stop bothering, and you end up with one whole sheet of just random apps that have got no rhyme or reason. And I think we all rely on muscle memory to find where those apps are. You just know after a while, if you're always going into Instagram, your thumb knows before you do where the app is. So Apple have recognized now that people are using many, many more apps than they used to. And they've made it so that when you swipe all the way to the right on your phone, you'll have what's called the app library. So the app library is like a curated view of all of your apps, and Apple have already put them into what they suggest to be the right folders for those apps. It's not to replace your home screen, so you can still have your home screen and have it organized how you want, but you can also turn your home screens off. So for example, I have one screen of icons with my most used ones like Safari, Mail, and that kind of thing, and a couple of the new widgets, and then I've hidden the other screens. And then I just use the app library to launch anything which is not one of my everyday apps. And I've definitely found that easier to work with. Also, this is a welcome thing. A lot of you probably over the years got frustrated that when you get a phone call, it takes over your complete screen. And when you're doing something, you have no choice but to either wait out the call if you don't want to answer it, like I do most of the time, or you have to decline a call to get rid of the screen. And if you're in the middle of doing something, that's super frustrating. So now you just have a nice, a much more subtle kind of drop down from the top, which, yeah, allows you to just discreetly ignore, as most of us do, and carry on with what you're doing and not kind of take over the whole screen. So that's a small thing, but I think it's quite a cool thing. Been waiting a long time. And picture in picture. So finally, if you're watching a video, either on Safari or in a supported app, I'm imagining Netflix and YouTube, for example, will be supported, and iPlayer. So if you've had it on iPads now for a year or two, and now you can actually watch a video whilst doing something else on your phone, which is cool because I find myself doing more and more on my phone as the years go by and less on my Mac and iPad. So I manage most of my business from my phone, and sometimes it's tedious if I'm doing my accounting, for example, especially this year. So having something you can watch whilst you're doing it is pretty cool. So yeah, that's picture in picture. And messages, again, has been given the same updates as on the Mac. You have the pinned chats at the top there. And when somebody does something, their little circle animates and you get little pop-ups telling you what they're saying, and you can dive into them, which is quite nice. The guides also, I think the guides look better actually on the iPhone than they do on the Mac. They look a bit more kind of lost on the big screen on a Mac, but on the iPhone, they kind of take over the whole display and make it easier for you to kind of scroll through the guides. So yeah, they've partnered with some big ones like the Louis Vuitton City Guides and Zagat for their restaurants. And I'm sure lots of publishers will be putting their guides on there. They're free at the moment. I don't think there's any plans, at least to begin with, to monetize any of this stuff. So I think all of the publishers are putting their content on there for free. But yeah, it basically means that you can just find some curated guides for a city that you're going to visit and save it and visit everything on that guide. So yeah, there's also a new app, Translate app, which they've built, and it's very simple actually. It's beautifully simple. It doesn't have a huge amount of features. You literally just type or use the microphone. And what's cool is you can have a two-way conversation with somebody, and you just hold the phone, and when you press the microphone button, it just translates whatever anybody's saying. So you choose which language. So in this screenshot, you can see it's English to Spanish. And when the Spanish person talks, it will automatically understand that they're talking Spanish and show you the English translation, and vice versa. So you can actually, two people can be standing there with your phone and both be talking slowly and it will translate for you. The other cool thing is it does it all on the phone. So unlike Google Translate and a few of the other apps out there, it doesn't send any of your data or recordings to a third-party server somewhere else. So it isn't monitoring what you're saying and what you're doing. It's storing everything locally. And what's very cool is you can actually download the languages so they'll work completely offline without any internet connection at all, which very few of the apps allow that. And the ones that do, you have to pay a premium for. So it uses Apple's built-in machine learning to basically learn your voice better and offer better translations. So yeah, it's a very basic, simple app, but it does a really good job of something which a lot of us struggle with when we're on holiday, for example. So yeah, that's Translate. And Siri's been redesigned. So Siri, again, a bit like telephone calls, would take over your entire display. And whenever you invoked Siri, it would just fill up the screen, and whatever you were doing, you just stopped and Siri took over. So now Siri has a small icon that appears at the bottom of the screen when you invoke Siri, and any of the search results or prompts that it gives you appear as a card at the top of the screen, whereas before it used to just fill up the whole screen with a dark sheet. So now it's much more subtle. Siri's also been updated to answer a lot more questions. So people often complain that Siri was never quite as good as things like Alexa, or Google Home at kind of finding answers. It used to always just say, why don't you search the web for that? Whereas now it's actually giving us quite a few more direct answers to search results. And I think they are beginning to work hard on that. I think they stopped really focusing on Siri for a while and put more energy into other things, and you can tell it kind of got a bit slow across the gamut of all the different search and voice assistants out there. So Siri was lagging behind, but it seems like they're really working hard, and now they're saying that it can answer 20,000 more queries than it used to 2 years ago. So that's a good thing. Hopefully it will come up to par very shortly. I think that the area where Apple gets a little bit stuck is the trade-off between Apple learning from your data and security. And Apple's, of all the company, the least keen to access your information and your data. So with Amazon Alexa and with Google Home, they're very they're data grabby. So they basically swallow all of the data that you're feeding them, and then they improve their assistance using that data. With Apple, they only do it with your permission, and most people, when they set up their devices, they don't allow that permission. So it does take Apple a lot longer to improve Siri. But I think it's a side effect of the trade-off being a much more secure device generally, and Apple not selling the data to advertisers, etc. Yes. Now you can also ask Siri to send a voice message as well. Before you could only send a text message, but now you can do a voice recording as well, which is a nice new feature. And car keys. So I don't know if any of you have cars which are supported with CarPlay, which is Apple's kind of mode. When you're in a car, it's a safer mode and it just shows a simpler interface. But one of the new features is car keys. So with, I think at the moment it's BMW, but a few other manufacturers are going to do it too. Basically, your car key becomes a virtual card on your phone, and it's synchronized across your iCloud. And whenever you approach your vehicle, it will just automatically unlock it before you even step inside. So when you approach it, it'll pop up on your phone and say, do you want to unlock your car? The really cool thing about it is you can leave your keys at home, not use your physical keys. And you can also digitally lend the key to somebody. So you can send somebody a link to the key, and you can say they can use the key for 4 hours or for a day or two. So you can actually have tons of keys if you want. But again, it's only going to be obviously in new cars, and it's not going to be retrofitted into older cars. And yes, it will also work with Apple Watch. App clips. Now this is probably the most confusing new thing for people, and it was for me actually. It took me a while to get my head around what this is. They made a big deal of it in the keynote. Basically, the issue that people have with apps and the App Store is that there are often things in our day-to-day lives that require us to download an app, but it's not something that we would necessarily want to keep the app for. It's not something we might want to do all the time. So one example that they give is that you go to a coffee shop and the coffee shop uses an app to pay for your coffee, especially in these times when no contact payments and things are all very important. But you might be visiting a coffee shop in New York that you plan to never ever visit again, and the hassle of downloading an app just so you can pay for your coffee. So you have to download an app, register it, attach your payment details and all of that stuff just to buy one coffee. It means that most people, when they go into a coffee shop and they're told that you need to use an app, you just stand there for 15 minutes like a lunatic trying to figure out this app and register it and all of that stuff, when you just want to pay for your bloody coffee. So what they've introduced is app clips. And what they are is they're tiny versions of apps which have to be less than 10 megabytes in size. So they should download very quickly. And you download them by either just being in a location, and it will pop up when you're in the location with NFC technology, or there'll be a QR code at the location. So for example, there might be a QR code in a parking spot. And rather than you having to download a parking app and register and attach your payment details, you would just scan the QR code. And as you can see in these screenshots, a tiny little square will pop up and allow you to either pay for something, register your parking or whatever. And they're basically just like a mini version of the app that you would have otherwise downloaded. And they just hang around for 30 days on your phone, and then they just disappear after a while. And then you can either download the full app if you want to access the things regularly, or you can, the next time you go to that place, you can still use the app clip instead. So it's just basically a way of streamlining apps, and so people don't have to have a phone full of apps that they barely use all the time. So that's not an easy one to necessarily understand until you use it. Is there any questions? Are there any questions about app clips actually before I move on, because they are quite complicated to understand? No questions? Nope. Okay. Just in the question, any changes to music, audiobook, podcast apps that came with Catalina? I don't think so. The music app actually has changed a little. So music now, you're going to see my taste. Oh dear. So music now is the browse is pretty much the same, but what was called For You is now called Listen Now, and they've also added icons and things there. So Listen Now is taking the place of For You. But other than that, there's not much functionality wise. If I play something, let me play a song. They've also added lyrics in full screen. So if I play this, turn it down, and if I press the lyrics up here, you now have the play along as you go lyrics. Oh, go away. But other than that, there's not any huge changes to those apps. The Books app hasn't changed either, and the podcast app's pretty much the same. I think the only changes I've made in the apps is, I think in voice recordings now you can actually edit the sound quality and improve the sound. But other than that, I don't think there's many changes in in any of the stock apps themselves. Okay, back. So that's app clips. Oh, minimize that because. So compatibility. So iOS 14 will work on as far back as the iPhone SE version 1 and the iPhone 6S. So anything before that, unfortunately, won't work with iOS 14. So you'll be stuck with 13. And you can see here this list of all the supported phones. So both iOS 14 and macOS Big Sur, macOS 11, will be in September. It's usually the second week of September. I don't think it'll be any different this year. But currently the public betas are available for you to try if you wish. I wouldn't try them if you rely on your phone or your Mac to do anything too important. So I would only try them if you've got a second device that you could use. So I, for example, have kept my iPad on the old iOS 13 just in case anything doesn't work on my phone. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily update everything unless you've got options, because you could still end up in trouble. Despite me saying it's one of the best betas that they've done actually in terms of bugs and problems. It feels a lot more finished than previous beta tests did. So that is iOS 14. Are there any iOS general questions before I move on to the last section? Because the last section isn't that huge, but it's quite interesting. Any questions, anyone? Are you all still awake? I can't see you. Still there. Okay. I might have just been talking to myself for the last half an hour. I don't know.
No.
Because yeah, when I'm sharing my screen, all of the other things disappear, so I can't see your beautiful faces, unfortunately. Right. So the next part I'm going to talk about then, and if you have any questions, oh, you're awake, John Cook, good. Yeah, if you have any questions, just type them, and I'll get to them as soon as I can, and we'll have a Q&A at the end for any randoms as we normally do. But yeah, the next section is very interesting. So yeah, I remember. I started working for Apple in 2004, and when I was obviously 10 years old. Yeah, so Apple, in literally the week that I started working for Apple, they made the announcement that they were switching to Intel. And so prior to Intel, Apple was using the G chips, their own architecture. And I remember every single day when I was working in the Apple store, you'd get an Apple geek coming in, screaming at us, literally shouting at us, "What are you doing? Why are you betraying us? Why?" Well, as if like lowly shop workers had anything to do, but in those days they thought we did. Well, to be fair, we did. We had the bat phone to Steve Jobs' office, so that we could get fired very easily if we wanted to. So yes, I remember people were coming in every day and they were almost hurt that Apple had kind of dumped the G chips and gone with Intel. And it's because in those days, Intel was the leader, and Intel machines were coming out faster and more efficient every year or so, and Apple ones were coming out every 3 or 4 years with a new chip. So Apple made the decision to switch to Intel. And I remember it being a massive headache because it completely changed the demographics for software and developers. So all the existing Mac apps had to be reprogrammed, and the Macs at the time had to have a piece of software on them called Rosetta, which would allow them to read old PowerPC based software. And then you also had to check when you downloaded an app or bought an app that it was universal binary, which meant it would work on all kinds of Mac. So for a period, we had a couple of Macs which were still G chips, PowerPC chips, and a few Macs which were Intel chips. And it was so confusing for people. It was really confusing because in those days, Apple didn't have that much clout with software developers. They couldn't really order them what to do. There wasn't an app store. So it was down to software developers who were making disks and sending out physical boxes to remanufacture everything and redo everything. So it was a good like 3 years, I think, before you didn't really have to worry too much about apps not being compatible. So it's going to be interesting. So why are they doing it again? It's a big question. So yeah, as I've said here, that the message of the past few years is that Macs are dying and that iOS is the way to go. But Apple are still kind of putting the Mac hat in the ring to say, no, Macs aren't going anywhere. And they're still the core business of what Apple do. And to prove that, they want to show that they want Macs to be as good as they possibly can be. So they say that using their own chips will bring more integration with hardware, energy efficiency, and make it much easier for developers to make software for all Apple devices without having to make multiple versions of things. So over the past few years, Apple has really kind of dominated efficiency in chips. And that's why, even though you have a lot of Android devices, which are way higher specs than Apple devices, they still run incredibly slow in comparison to iOS devices, because the integration between hardware and software is so tight that Apple can squeeze out every tiny bit of efficiency from their chips. Whereas Samsung and all the other manufacturers are all using multiple variations of different chips and things, and you end up losing a lot in that translation between all these different pieces of hardware. So Apple are trying to unify, because they've done such a great job with iOS and they've dominated the whole world when it comes to, especially tablets. I mean, no one else really competes with Apple on tablets quite as well as they do. So they're ditching Intel. One of the issues is that Intel is has kind of almost ground to a halt and has really got slow at updating chips. And there's also been in the past 3 or 4 years a few big security issues with their chips and problems, and Apple have had to scrap timelines and not release Macs when they wanted to. So Apple has never been keen at being a slave to another manufacturer's time scales. So they made the decision to just get rid of them and start all over again. So that's why. And it's because they are the ARM chips, which is what the architecture is. It's called ARM. They are incredibly powerful. And the example that we already have is that the 2018 and 2020 iPad Pro models, which have the A12X and the A12Z, or Z if you're American, are almost as fast as the 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro models, which it's kind of hard to understand how that's possible. A lot of people don't understand how significant that is, but it's compared to any other tablet out there. It's essentially a MacBook Pro in a tablet form. So what Apple are doing is they're building a kit that developers can buy, which is basically, it will be a A12 chip in a Mac Mini for developers to be able to kind of play around with the architecture and get the most out of their software. But the plan is that they will be releasing unique chips that are specifically for Macs, and they'll have multiple cores and this kind of thing. But the first 2 or 3, so my suspicion is that the first Macs to be released with these chips will probably be MacBooks, maybe not MacBook Pros. Because the first 1 or 2 will probably use existing chips or a modified existing chip, as Apple will start to design unique chips for Macs. But what this means is that there'll be a common architecture with iOS. So it means that all the stuff that developers have to do to develop apps for iOS will be exactly the same for developing apps for Macs. And then it essentially means that Catalyst will no longer be required. So apps won't need to be translated for Mac anymore. And you'll literally be able to download any iOS app and run it natively on a Mac without a developer having to really change anything. So I envisage very shortly the app stores will probably merge into one app store rather than having 2 or 3 app stores. So that's good news. I said it was coming. So there'll be a transitional period. Mac OS Big Sur is already modified for these Macs. Because they're saying that they'll be out soon. There should be, unlike the previous time, almost no issues with transitioning from one to the other. So all of the Apple apps will be updated immediately. and developers will be able to already from like June onwards this year use Xcode to update their existing apps, and to develop this new universal binary which will work on both Intel Macs and Macs built with Apple Silicon. So unlike the previous transition that Apple had to go through, the entire software infrastructure now is all web-based, so it's not going to be a difficult thing for developers to just replace their app instantly. Whereas in the old transition that happened before, it took, like I said, 3 years, which was kind of crazy, and it was stressful to work there in those times. So the transitional period is actually going to be 2 years. So it'll be 2 years, a 2-year period where Apple will still sell Intel Macs and they'll still support Intel Macs. So yeah, what about your current Mac? So Apple will continue to release software for years after the transition. So those who purchase Intel-based Macs can still expect to receive updates throughout the life of their machines. And Apple is still going to be launching new Intel Macs in that transition period. So there's still new Intel Macs that are going to be released. And I've told you, I probably say it every single time we talk, but when Apple release a product, they guarantee to support it for 5 years. So if you go out and buy a new iMac today, you know that you'll still be able to get updates for it within 4 to 5 years at the least. And quite often they surpass that. There are some devices which work beyond that period. So any of you that have got an Intel Mac today, you're not going to have to worry about software just disappearing or stuff not working. It's going to be a 2-year transition period to make all the Macs Apple Silicon. But even after that transition period, software will still be universal binary and work on both Intel and Apple Silicon Macs. Will existing software work? Yes. So there will be 2 ways that software can work. There's universal binary, which is where the developers make 2 versions of their software and batch it into one piece. So it doesn't matter which Mac you've got. But then if there are softwares that aren't updated early enough or quickly enough, then there's this other system called Rosetta, which will just translate the app into a compatible app. So it means that literally from day one, when the first iMac comes out, almost every piece of software will work on Apple Silicon. There won't be any issues with running anything. But I'm pretty sure, because it's so easy, I think most developers will go down the universal binary route and just do the small amount of work to update it. But any of those that don't or are a bit old, Rosetta 2 should step in and allow you to run those pieces of software. So what it means is no more Windows on a Mac for now. So Boot Camp is being retired. You won't be able to natively install Windows onto a Mac directly. And there also are hints that virtualization won't be possible, at least to begin with, because people like VMware or Parallels will have to completely rewrite their apps because they use a lot of sophisticated parts of the operating system to virtualize another operating system. So they won't be able to work on Rosetta, and they would have to make a universal binary. But Apple have been very cagey about answering the question, will they work? So that gives people reason to believe that there might be an issue there. So potentially it could be an issue if you need to run Windows on a Mac. Over the years, Apple have got less and less keen to talk about Windows on a Mac. But at the moment, you still can if you want to. But yes, if you invest in a Apple Silicon Mac, at least in the early days, you won't be able to use Windows on it directly. When? So at WWDC, Mr. I sometimes call him Ellen DeGeneres, Mr. Tim Cook, might be the same person, said that they will be before the end of this year. So I'm thinking probably October, November. There'll be a new Mac, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it'll probably be one of the cheaper, smaller Macs, like a MacBook. And they're saying that it will take a period of about 2 years for it to complete, and all of their Macs will then be Silicon. So that's the presentation done with. Do you have any questions about that? I'm going to stop screen sharing. Okay. Any questions? Let me have a look. Is Translate coming to iPad OS? Yes, Translate is supposed to be. I think it's missing at the moment, isn't it? I don't have iPad OS on my iPad at the moment. There are a few things missing from the iPad, actually. On the iPad, you can't move widgets to wherever you want, and you can on the iPhone, which doesn't make any sense because the iPad has so much more screen space for you to do that. So I don't understand why that's not possible yet. So I think there are a few things missing from iPad OS, which will probably be added later on. Who's that? Simon. I've been using iOS 14 beta on my phone since it was available without any issues. Yeah, same. I didn't have any problems with that. My MacBook Pro 2017 runs on full fat i7 and it gets pretty warm. Yes, so one of the huge advantages of the Apple Silicon is that it will be a lot more power efficient, and it will manage batteries so much better. And you know, all of you guys using your phones and iPads, you hammer them all day and they're not Samsungs exploding in your pocket, are they? So I imagine that, yeah, I mean, my MacBook Pro right now it sounds like it's about to take off, and it feels like a heater. It's like kicking out, and it's a latest one, and it cost me a lot of money, but they do run very, very hot at the moment, and I think that will be a big difference. And that's partly where the efficiency comes from, because if they're losing that much heat, it means that they're losing that much energy, and if they're losing that much energy, the energy isn't going into actually running the computer. So with the current Intel chips, so much power and effort is put into cooling them down. And with the A chips, they just run so much cooler anyway that, yeah, it can only mean good things. And it will probably mean that Macs will probably last a lot longer, because we tend to replace iPads and iPhones, if we don't smash them, when we just want a new feature. They don't tend to break as often as devices used to. And that's because the Apple Silicon is an all-in-one chip. It's not 10 different chips all connected with different circuit boards. It's one chip with everything in it. So it just means it's much more efficient, and you don't have duplication of parts, and everything is a lot more kind of, yeah, efficient. So yeah, it should definitely run cooler, and that will only be a good thing. So yeah, no burning holes in your pockets. Upgrading to a new phone burns whole of the cash in your pocket. Well, yeah, that's not going to change. So one of the benefits of Apple Silicon is price, actually. So it will be a lot cheaper for Apple, not to begin with, because to ramp up production, they will have to invest a lot of money. But they won't be using a massive third-party corporation like Intel and having to pay their huge license fees. And they'll probably stop having these constant court battles, which they have to have with Intel. So some people are saying that they might even make Macs cheaper. I wouldn't hold my breath about that. Apple try and squeeze profit wherever they can. So if they manage to make more profit, they're not going to pass that down to us, I don't think so. Apple said, how close, fast. How close are we to an iPad being like a laptop? Well, I mean, some would say that the current iPad Pro almost is a laptop, to be honest. Now you've got the keyboard case, which is very expensive. It's very expensive. I haven't ordered one yet, but I'm tempted. The new keyboard case has a proper backlit keyboard and a proper glass touchpad. And now that you can use mice and touchpads with iOS on an iPad, there's not that much difference between a laptop and an iPad, to be honest. It's only if you're doing very sophisticated things, really, that you'll need to have a MacBook in the future. So it's mostly going to be people who are doing like very complicated designs and things. But even Adobe are releasing more and more sophisticated versions of Photoshop, and they're working on Illustrator and InDesign for iPad. So I think we're only a year or two away from laptops being more or less obsolete for most people. Apple said running virtual machines on the Mac will be better than before. They demoed Linux running a Windows virtual machine under Parallels, just not with Boot Camp. Okay, cool. So Mark's saying that Parallels will run. I think the article I read was basically all of the virtual machine software developers weren't answering the press's questions directly and were being cagey. So there was a lot of the Mac press was kind of like, what's going on? Why aren't they giving us direct answers? But yeah, if you've read that they will work, then that's cool. But yeah, Boot Camp's definitely gone for sure. Running old versions of macOS. Well, that's an interesting one, because one of the things which was dug up is that the new Apple Silicon Macs, they have a new method of recovery mode, So the new recovery mode allows you to actually turn off a lot of the security features, which you couldn't turn off before, which would allow you to install any Mac OS without it having to get permission from a server first. So often a lot of people have problems with installing older Mac OSs because it checks with Apple servers whether you've either purchased it or downloaded it in the past. And if you haven't, it will ask you to either find a disk or you have to use an account which has downloaded the software in the past. But with the new method that it uses for recovery mode, there is an option to turn off the checking the operating system for a certificate. So in theory, yeah, you should be able to install older OSs still. I don't know the answer for sure, but that's what I'm guessing from that. Any changes to ports for iPhones and MacBooks? No idea yet. I mean, this should be the year that they switch to USB-C on everything. It would make complete sense to do that. I thought it was going to be last year and it wasn't. So I think with the iPhone that's coming out in September, I'd be very surprised if it's still Lightning. But for some reason, they are still hanging on to Lightning in a few places, like with the Apple Pencil and, oh no, sorry, the old Apple Pencil, that's gone. So yeah, I think I'm quietly confident that it should be this year. One thing I'm not so sure about is whether this is the year that we'll have 5G. There was a lot of delay with Apple and 5G because of who manufactures the 5G chips. And then also coronavirus has caused a huge amount of delays from a lot of the Asian factories that make the 5G technology. And then there's also been a whole load of political nonsense about 5G technology. So I don't know, I'm hopeful that 5G will come with the iPhones this year, but I don't think it's at any kind of point guaranteed at this stage. Okay, any changes? Let's have a look. Isn't so much. Yes, from Simon. Yes, it's a system on a chip, SoC, rather than a CPU, of course. Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's super efficient, because it's just all in one. It's like having one baby with 6 heads that you need to feed rather than 6 babies running around. Okay. So any more questions on Apple Silicon? It looks like I've answered all of those. Oh, Thunderbolt will still be supported, by the way, on Silicon. Even though Thunderbolt is an Intel intellectual property, it was developed with Apple's cooperation. So Apple are keeping Thunderbolt as a standard, which is, as you know, is already currently the USB-C port itself. So yeah, Thunderbolt will still be sticking around. Yeah, so yeah, there is a Windows for ARM, but you can't buy it. And Microsoft, I think I read somewhere that Microsoft have no intention of making it available. I think there's a push-pull thing going on between Apple and Microsoft, as there always has been. So I don't know. I don't know whether, I mean, I still don't necessarily understand why people would want Windows on a Mac. I guess if you have some piece of really specialist software that absolutely needs it, then yeah, but I wouldn't do that. Yeah, any more questions, anyone? Give you some time to type.
Actually, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to unmute.
Oh yeah, talk now. You can talk to, yeah. Now the presentation's over, you can all scream at me.
I hope that's gin and tonic.
No, unfortunately, but I should have done that. I would have got away with it. You couldn't smell my breath. Okay, so now that the iPad, especially Pro, is so powerful, might iPhones get smaller again? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't think they will, because I think they'll always keep the smaller factor one that they've got at the moment, but I don't think they will go smaller again, because apps now are so sophisticated that apps need as much space as they possibly can to do the things that we do. We don't just make calls on our phones anymore. We use them for all kinds of things, and people every day are all watching Netflix on their phones and trying to work on spreadsheets and stuff like that. So I don't think they're going to get any smaller. I think if anything, they're probably going to get bigger. Yeah.
Brad,
hello.
Yeah, hello. Do you always wear a T-shirt that matches the background?
Yeah. Well, I did decide that I would try and blend in as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving about, and then we'll know where you are. Yes, right.
Okay. No more questions. Oh, any implications for photography? Oh, in what sense, Billy Brew?
Any sense?
Any sense? Well, photography. Are you talking specifically about Apple Silicon or iOS and
anything we've
macOS?
been talking about?
Nothing that interesting, really. I mean, as with the comment I made earlier about printers, again, camera manufacturers are also the ones which are very slow to update software and firmware. I don't think there's going to be any major issues, though, from what I can tell. All my devices have worked fine so far, and I haven't come across any problems. I think the only issues potentially are with Adobe. If you use Adobe software, Lightroom might need a bit of a kick up the backside. But so far, everything seems to be working okay. I haven't tried tethering any cameras yet, but most things seem to be okay. I think the biggest changes were actually made last year in Catalina in how the system works, and then the all of the stuff behind the scenes. And this year it tends to be more of the surface stuff, more of the graphics and the tweaking that's done. So on the surface it looks huge, like there's loads of changes, but underneath there aren't a huge amount of changes. That was all done last year, really.
I have
questions?
a question. Yes, you referred to a new app translation.
Yes.
Is that an app that comes with iOS 14, or is it?
Yes. Yes, it's already there. So if I'll open it on my phone and see if I can hold it up for you to see. So let's translate to German, shall we?
There are apps with that name out there now. That
yes, iTranslate's a big one. I don't know.
$5 or so. This is new. Okay, thank you.
So if I let's translate. English to German, and it's crashed. So, so no, but yes, it is. It's already included on iOS 14. So when you update to iOS 14, it will just be there as another app. But when it's working, it has been fine. They do refer to it as being in a beta at the moment. So I think it's heavily reliant on machine learning, and that's stuff that Apple is still working hard on. And again, because it's on the device and not on a server somewhere, it's probably going to take a lot of work for Apple to make it as good as it should be. So I think that's probably why they're saying it's beta at the moment, because for them the priority is security over being able to kind of flood their servers with your data. But yeah, it should be there as soon as you update.
Brad, David.
Hello.
Hi. What you mentioned about the translators will be on the phone.
Yeah.
Is that by default?
Yes.
On the phone, or do you have to switch it on or off? Kind of.
No, it's by default. It's by default. So the app will just be there. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the translate will just be there in Safari as well when you're browsing the web. It will detect when you're on a website that isn't in English, and it will ask you if you want to translate it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Brad, I think we need to send you away to a very, very well-deserved, very big gin and tonic. And, you can see the way that lockdown is going in this house.
Well, there'll be no shortage of juniper berry pickers. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Very welcome.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
You're very
all
welcome.
so much for joining us.
Thank you for coming, international people, as well.
Yeah, this is a record audience for us on Zoom. 48 people at one point, which is lovely. And I hope we'll do it again.
Yes. Soon.
So thanks, Brad.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, everyone. And I hope we'll see lots of you in 4 weeks' time at the end of next month. Needless to say, I'll be getting lots and lots of mail outs to you between now and then. Stay safe. Have a lovely summer. don't get
Before you
bored.
go, you're recording, yes?
Yes, I am.
Is it going to be available somewhere?
Well, it is, but because
Down at your local market on a DVD.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Oh, you go to Blockbusters. Blockbusters will have it.
we ask for a donation to club funds because obviously we normally make income at our meetings because we make a small charge on the door, as I'm sure you know. And because we can't do that, the only way that we can make any money for the group at all is to just ask for a donation to group funds for a copy of the recording. But all we ask for is a minimum of £3, and I'd be delighted to send one over to you. So, David, you're not a Suffolk Mug member, are you?
No, I'm in Wickford with Seal.
So I don't presently have your email address. So if you could make sure that Martin or David has it,
okay,
they can send it on to me.
I'll do that. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and see you next month.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, Brad.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done, Brad.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Nice jump.
Thank you. Cheers.
Go.
Oh, I think Brad's left the meeting. Looks like me and you, Phil.
Still looking for the leaves.
Good night.
Yeah, okay. Nice to see you.
And
Bye-bye.
you. Cheers.